Good morning from the brutal capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur. Hope you're having an amazing day, because if you're having an amazing day, I'm having an amazing day. If I'm having an amazing day, you should be having an amazing day as well. Look at all this capitalist architecture around me. Isn't capitalist architecture just so fucking ugly? Yes, well, that's unfortunately the truth about living in some capitalist dystopia. You have to endure all these capitalist eyesores all over the place. Capitalist architecture is simply hideous, don't you think? Anyway, today I would like to talk to you about race hustlers, or people who bring in racial identity politics into their activism. And I want to show you at the end of this video that these race hustlers are a bunch of scammers, liars and cheats, and you're better off not listening to them. So many ethnic minorities were very concerned about the case of right-wing Malaysian politician Akmal Saleh posing incorrectly, by the way, with a samurai sword, because he was basically trying to instigate racial tensions between the Malays and the non-Malays. You know, by trying to insinuate that we need to defend the dignity of the Malay race. And unfortunately, race hustling is common business throughout many parts of the world. And it's certainly not only right-wing Malay nationalists who are guilty of it. There are three other race hustlers that I would like to talk about in this video. And those are the Chinese ultras, the Zionists, and of course the Afro-Saxon ultras. Because race hustling fundamentally dampens revolutionary spirit, and it creates distrust not only between races but also between members of the same race, because it basically separates wheat from chaff by trying to insinuate who a real member of the race is and who a traitorous member of that race is. Fundamentally, the biggest, most devastating race hustler in the world, of course, was an Austrian gentleman who failed to get into art school. But I can tell you, race hustling occurs in just about any ethnic community. You know, I just find it so disgustingly disingenuous when you have rabid, hate-filled Zionists claiming that any attack on them is an attack on all the Jewish people around the world. Yes, I'm sure you've seen more than a couple of times Zionists claiming that an attack on them personally is an anti-Semitic attack. And if you don't like them personally, that must mean you hate all the Jewish people around the world. But the funny thing is that this is actually a trend that you see in Saxonized diaspora people. They somehow appoint themselves the spokesperson for every member of their community. And these extremely disingenuous people, when you attack them personally because you don't like them, they try to speak on behalf of the entire racial or ethnic community. And I see the same with Afro-Saxon ultras, who call my friend, Comrade Rice, an Oreo, which basically means black on the outside, white on the inside, just because he doesn't happen to fit their very specific mold of what a real African person is supposed to be. And I get that a lot from, diaspora Chinese ultras who call me a banana race traitor, well, because I don't particularly have any interest in learning the Chinese language. And that, you know, makes me a Malayized Chinese somehow even worse than a xenophobe. And you even see, I'm really sick of talking about this topic, frankly, but you also see Asian American ultras calling me whitewashed and calling me a self-hating Asian because I call out the bad behavior in the more radical members of the Chinese Malaysian community. For example, I don't think it's good behavior to call people filthy race traitors, hanjians, just because, you know, they happen to not be as interested in the Chinese language or don't share your enthusiasm for the preservation of vernacular schools. I'm pretty neutral to vernacular schools. You know, as long as you respect other Malaysians who do not speak Chinese and who have no intention of learning Chinese, and we can respect each other as civilized adults, yes, that is fine. But you had this Asian American fella, I think, I'm not even going to mention his name because I don't want to draw attention to his channel. He very disingenuously said, you know, oh, he can't speak Chinese and he hates Chinese people who do speak Chinese. When did I ever say that I hated Chinese people who speak Chinese? I get along with decent, proper Chinese people who behave properly as a Confucian is supposed to behave. And calling someone nasty names or expressing hatred to someone who doesn't share your interests is not proper behavior. And it's just the same with Afro-Saxon ultras as well. You know, like they very, very opportunistically say, oh, you know, an attack on me personally is an attack on all the black people of the world. And yet these people hate Oreos. They hate people they deem Oreos even more than they hate white supremacists. In the same way, the Chinese ultras, and there are many who come after me as some kind of a horrid race traitor, they hate bananas, people they deem to be yellow on the outside and white from the inside. They hate bananas even more than they hate xenophobes like Serpenza. But whenever anyone says anything against them personally, even if it has nothing to do with them being Chinese, people just call out their bad behavior. Then they say, oh, you are attacking the Chinese people, you know. And it might not even have anything to do with them being Chinese. It's just talking about their bad behavior. In the same way, if we talk about the bad behavior of an individual African American person, it doesn't mean that we're anti-black. And if we talk about the bad behavior of an individual Zionist person, of course it doesn't mean we're anti-Jewish. In fact, the funny thing is, just like the Afro-Saxon or the Chinese diaspora ultra, the Zionists hate non-Zionist Jews. They hate them even more than they hate anti-Semites. Try being a Jewish person who has no interest in learning Hebrew in the same way some assimilated Chinese in Malaysia, like myself, have no interest in learning Mandarin. Now, don't take that as a personal attack here. It just means I have more fun things to do with my time, like, you know, going to the gym, lifting weights, hiking, having sex, drinking. There are more fun things to do with my time than reconnecting with my ancestral heritage. I actually have hobbies. Try being a non-Zionist Jew who's not interested in reconnecting with the so-called motherland, as if the motherland of the Jewish diaspora were not the countries in which they were born. You try being a non-Zionist Jew and you see just how nasty the Zionists are towards people who don't conform to their mold of Jewishness. In the same way, Asian American ultras are so nasty to Asians who don't conform to their mold of what being a real Asian person is. That means being a model minority, speaking some East Asian language, and of course eating with chopsticks. They forget that there are Asians who eat with their hands as well, right? So the point is, you know, these opportunistic diaspora ultras do not truly care about the communities they purport to be fighting for. If anything bad happened to me, for example, do you think these Chinese diaspora ultras who call me a banana race traitor would be crying for me? No, they probably laugh. If I drop the bench press bar and on my neck, you think they would feel sad if I drop the bench press bar on my neck? They would laugh. You know, the funny thing is, in fact, you can look at how nasty these people are in my comment section, and you'll find they're even nastier to people they regard as bananas than they are to white supremacists themselves, because they fundamentally don't respect their own people. In the same way, Afro-Saxon ultras, now they don't have a language, but I imagine they would be even nastier if they spoke some African language. And then they would be separating wheat from chaff by separating the real foundational blacks and the fake ones. You know, these people are all politicians in the end. They are not genuinely concerned for every member of their ethnic community. And I keep saying, organize on the basis of class, because you could meet someone of the same race as you and they could hate each other. You think any of these Asian diaspora ultras consider themselves to have any solidarity with me? You think Douglas Kim has any solidarity with me? Wake up! There's no such thing as racial unity, because people of the same race might hate each other, for all you know. But there can be a thing known as class solidarity, because when you're in a class, you're all in the same boat. Now, the thing is that Zionists and other types of ethnic ultras or race ultras are basically using their own people as pawns for their own political ambitions. Even if they don't want anything to do with members of their race who don't fit their very specific mold about how a real person of their race or ethnicity is supposed to behave, they will happily use them as pawns in order to advance their own political ambitions. So realize that race hustlers or ethnic hustlers are not sincere in what they purport to be supporting. You will see just how insincere these race hustlers are by the way they treat members of their own race, like myself, who don't share their vision or don't share their goals and don't particularly fit their mold of what a real person of their own race is supposed to be. And well, the prime example of such a person would be someone like Theodor Herzl, for example. Yes. Now, the idea that many people have of Israel is that it was the answer to the Holocaust. Many people have that mistaken conception. Many well-meaning people have that mistaken conception either. But the thing is, the Holocaust took place in the 1940s. The idea for Israel was already taking place in the 19th century, even before Hitler was born. And Herzl himself said that, you know, the anti-Semites will become our allies and the anti-Semitic countries will work with us. Yeah. And guess what? You think Herzl cared about every member of the Jewish community? Well, let's see what Mr. Herzl says. You know, look at this quote of his. Look at his words. Jew baiting has merely stripped us of the weaklings of our race. Those are his words, verbatim. So you can't convince me that these ethnic ultras or race ultras really care about every member of their community. They keep showing their real face whenever a person of their race disagrees with them or doesn't fit the mold of what they expect is a true member of their race. And if a non-Zionist Jew got Jew baited, I don't think someone like Herzl would really care. He'd probably say they deserve it for being whitewashed, a sellout, a self-hating Jew. So as I was saying, race hustlers have no sincerity at all. Race hustlers are only using people of their own race as pawns for their own political ambitions. And ultimately they're not sincere, and they're simply using members of their own race for political leverage. And you can see just how nasty they are when towards people who don't share their vision. In fact, you'll be very surprised by the fact that many right-wing anti-Semitic Western reactionaries were actually fond of Zionism because they felt that it stifled the class consciousness of the Jewish people, because it made the Jewish people see themselves as Jewish first and working class second. In fact, Churchill, who was one of the biggest supporters of Zionism, basically believed that communism was a Jewish conspiracy, and so Zionism was a way to basically stifle this movement among the Jews by basically dampening their revolutionary spirit, dampening their class consciousness, and making them race conscious instead. But as I've said, don't believe for a moment that you need to have anything such as race loyalty. Because let me tell you, you shouldn't be gaslighted into believing you have any obligation to a person of your own race simply because they happen to be of the same race as you. I've no obligation towards Vincent Tan, for example. Vincent Tan's Chinese, I'm Chinese. Do you think we will get along? Do you think that we are in the same boat? Do you think that Vincent Tan will make any positive contribution to my life? Being a capitalist, as I've said, you have a lot more in common with a working class person of a different race than a capitalist of your own race. And you have to develop class consciousness rather than racial consciousness, because racial consciousness is how the ruling class divides people and makes people distrust each other and see workers of different races as enemies rather than potential comrades. And this is also how the capitalists basically gaslight people into being subservient to them, that you have some imaginary obligation to them simply because they're of the same race as you. Or basically, this is how reactionaries gaslight people into believing that they have some kind of obligation to them simply because they're of the same race. I have no obligation to a reactionary. My obligation is to the working class people of all races in Malaysia, not to reactionaries of any race, including my own. I have more in common with a Malay or an Indian working class person than I do with a Chinese capitalist. You see? Because we have the same class interests. So ultimately, race activism, or uniting on the basis of race, is a losing strategy. Because the only people who will win at the end of it are the reactionaries. And the reactionaries do not fundamentally care about people of their own race. They would use people of their own race for their own political agenda, but as I've shown you in this video, they really don't care. Like, they really, really do not. And you cease to be a member of their race even if you're of the same genetic code, the moment you question them or the moment you disagree with them, then they will regard you as an enemy. So like I've said, race hustlers are just a bunch of opportunists, they're a bunch of snakes, and they are fundamentally reactionaries. The thing is that there are many reactionaries who are now posing as socialists, and these people need to be called out. The moment you use words like banana or Oreo, or you basically try to disparage people for not fitting a certain ethnic mold, you are no longer a socialist. That's why I don't believe Labour Zionists are real socialists. In the same way, I don't believe any of these national socialists, like Douglas Kim, can count themselves as real socialists if they're bringing in things like, they're expressing hatred towards Asians who don't fit their rigid mold of what an Asian person is, or they're calling white Asian women who date white men, white male Asian female, bananas. You can't call yourself a real socialist if you bring in divisive, reactionary talking points. And that's basically it for today. Don't believe race hustlers. Race hustlers are fundamentally reactionary, and they will only serve their own interests, not the interests of the working people of their race. Thank you. Have a good day.